and it is the distinguished honor of proclaiming justice to the nations to invite Pastor Rafael Cruz. Every time I speak with this pastor, it encourages me more than I can tell you to see that there are leaders within the faith, within the Christian faith, who are willing to take a stand to defend our Jewish brethren, to defend the state of Israel, and to uphold the values of the United States of America. So without further ado, I would like to introduce you to Pastor Rafael Cruz.
Well, thank you, Lori. It is so great to be with you and so great to be here with proclaiming justice to the nations and to stand unequivocally with the state of Israel. You know, as a Christian, I realize that the Christian faith and Israel are intimately one, and you know, the God, we serve the same God, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And as a matter of fact, Jesus Christ was a Jew and who actually preached in the synagogues in Israel. He said, I came for the house of Israel. So we have a very unique adherence to one to another. But more than that, when we think at what America is, America was founded on the principles of the Torah. If we look at the Constitution of the United States of America, the Constitution of the United States of America came practically entirely from the Torah. Why is America a constitutional representative republic? Because of Exodus chapter 18, where after Abraham crossed the Red Sea, Abraham is out in the wilderness trying to govern perhaps a couple of million people. The Bible says 600,000 men plus women and children. And Abraham is trying to judge all these people. And his father-in-law, Jethro, comes and says, Abraham, what you're doing is not good. You can't be judging these people from morning until night. And in Exodus chapter 18, verse 21, God speaks to Abraham through Jethro. And he says, you select from among the people. Now this is very interesting. God didn't say, I will appoint. He says, you select, which is the same as you elect. In Deuteronomy chapter 1, verse 13, God says, you choose from among you able men, men of understanding, men of wisdom over all your tribes, and I will make them rulers over you. Again, God says, you choose, you elect. Going back to Exodus 18:21, you select from among the people, and then God gives 4 qualifications. Able men, such as fear God, men of truth, hating covetousness. Those are the qualifications that every candidate for public office must possess. Able men, such as fear God, men of truth, hating covetousness. And then he says, and set them up as rulers of thousands, rulers of hundreds, rulers of 50s, rulers of 10. So the model that God portrays is Moses, rulers of thousands, rulers of hundreds, rulers of 50s, rulers of 10. That's equivalent to federal government, state government, county government, local government. Verse 22, and only take up to Moses, that is to the federal government, matters of great importance. Everything else you handle yourself at the local level. That is the essence of federalism. That is the essence of limited government. That's Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution. That's the 9th Amendment and the 10th Amendment. All of that came out of Exodus 18, 21, and 22. That's why we are not a democracy. We are a constitutional representative republic. We need to realize that under a democracy, the minority has no rights. We saw that. We've seen that in so many countries where the majority has basically killed the minorities. But the constitutional republic, the fact that we are a republic was directly taken out of Exodus 18, 21, and 22. Again, why do we have 3 branches of government? Because of Isaiah chapter 33, verse 22, which says, talking about God, that he is our king, he is our judge, he is our lawgiver. They're the 3 branches of government: executive branch, judicial branch, and legislative branch. So the Word of God delineated the principles that are embedded in the Constitution of the United States of America. And so our Judeo-Christian principles are the foundational principles of America, the same as the foundational principles of Israel: honesty, integrity, hard work, individual responsibility, the rule of law, and yes, free enterprise and limited government. And those are clearly portrayed in the Word of God. Israel was the first country that actually was ruled by we the people, where everybody had rights, where even the poor were taken care of by commanding living gleanings for those that could eat. It also allowed equality among all the people. It also gave the opportunity for private ownership. Private ownership came out of the Bible. And actually, the year of Jubilee made it possible that rulers could not just confiscate all the land and become the only landowners and exploit the people, because the land reverted back to the original owners every 50 years. So it was civil liberties, it was equality, it was giving individual rights that no other nation had. We inherited all of that from the nation of Israel. But not only that, not only our spiritual foundation comes from the nation of Israel, but we are one and the same. You know, there are those that unfortunately within Christianity have been preaching, you know, replacement theology. Replacement theology is not scriptural. You cannot say that the Israel that the Bible is talking about is the church. There are many, many promises in the Word of God that speak of physical Israel, and their promise of physical Israel. Even in the New Testament, Romans chapter 9 and Romans chapter 11 very clearly talk about the promises to Israel. Ephesians chapter 2 talks about breaking down the wall of partition between Jew and Gentile, that we may become one and the same. That's our history, and that is our ultimate purpose, is that we both become one, because as I said before, we worship the same God. And so we need to realize that Israel, not just from a spiritual standpoint, but from a political standpoint, Israel represents the only true freedom-loving country in all the Middle East. The only country that stands as a jewel among countries where women have no rights, where there is no freedom, where there's no freedom of religion. In those other countries, if you are not a Muslim, you're persecuted. But even in Israel, where Muslim countries are totally enemies of Israel, there are many Muslims working in Israel. And there are Palestinians working in Israel. There are Christians working in Israel. And there is freedom of religion. We see a freedom that we cannot see anywhere else in the Middle East. We see a situation where it's such a dichotomy. I heard one presidential candidate saying, well, I am neutral between Israel and the Palestinians. How can we be neutral with one group of people governed by Hamas, who is a terrorist organization, who uses children as human shields, who has been an aggressor killing innocent Israelis, men, women, and children, and the state of Israel that has only stood to defend its population from these terrorists? There is no moral equivalence. We must, as Christians, stand unconditionally for the nation of Israel. You know, God will hold us accountable. Even in Romans chapter 9, it talks about Israel being the natural branch, and Christians are the engrafted branch to that same God. So how must we, as an engrafted branch, usurp the right of the natural branch? That is inconceivable. That is a misconception of Scripture. As a matter of fact, all those promises to Abraham, in Genesis chapter 12, verse 3, God says to Abraham, I will bless those who bless you. I will curse those who curse you. And I'll tell you, over the last 6-7 years, this nation has come very close to cursing the nation of Israel. And so we must go back to blessing the nation of Israel. Now, as a matter of fact, the intimacy between Israel and Christianity is brought to the forefront in Galatians chapter 3, verse 29, where the Apostle Paul says, if you are in Christ, you are the seed of Abraham and heirs according to the promise. So he's saying we come from the same root, which is Abraham. Our faith comes out of the same root, which is Abraham, which is the nation of Israel, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So we must stand unequivocally for the nation of Israel. I want to finish by saying my son, Ted Cruz, has been the strongest supporter of the nation of Israel in all of the Senate, in all of Washington. My son has stated that Jerusalem is the capital of Israel. Historically, it is the capital of Israel. My son has committed on day one to begin the process to moving the embassy from American embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. My son has committed to cutting funding for the Palestinian Authority until they recognize Israel's right to exist, to provide financial and military support for the state of Israel. We must stand unequivocally with the state of Israel. And especially this becomes very important when we realize this horrible deal that the Obama administration made with Iran. Whereas part of that, they even said, if Israel attacks Iran, the United States must stand with Iran. My son will tear that document to shreds, and we will stand unequivocally with the nation of Israel. My son has also pledged to cut funding to the United Nations unless they stop attacking Israel and stop their anti-Semitic policies. My son will stand with Israel unequivocally. In his first 2 years in the Senate, he went to Israel 3 times, met with Prime Minister Netanyahu 3 times, and they are close allies. I just encourage you, we must all stand with the nation of Israel. That is the beacon of light in all the Middle East. And we must, as Christians, stand with the Word of God, which commands us to pray for the peace of Jerusalem and to stand with our brethren in Israel. We are one and the same under God.
Our next panelist, who I have the honor of introducing to you, Tricia Miller. Tricia, I was able to get to know. She invited me to come and speak at the Camera Conference. And she is an analyst she's senior analyst and researcher for the Committee for Accuracy in Middle East Reporting. So Tricia is well written on this topic of Christian anti-Semitism and BDS. And so it is a great honor to introduce her to you. And I know she'll be available, all of our panelists will be available afterwards for interviews. We are going to do a Q&A session, but Tricia has done extensive research on this important topic of Christian anti-Semitism and what the church is doing, especially in pushing the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement. Please give a warm welcome to Tricia Miller.
Thank you all for being here. I want to talk about a few particulars about the BDS movement, but I want to spend most of my time talking about the danger of Christian silence in the face of BDS and the danger of remaining silent in relation to another very similar and rapidly growing threat to Israel's survival. Thankfully, just recently, the BDS movement has suffered some defeats. But overall, the movement has been gaining a lot of momentum in the last few years, as we all know, in universities, academic associations, municipalities, churches, you name it. Some of the best promoters of BDS are respected academics and Christian clergy who give this crusade undeserved credibility. BDS activists infiltrate mainstream organizations under the deceptive guise of promoting peace, justice, and human rights. However, this movement is anything but peaceful, as demonstrated by the frequent violent actions of BDS activists. And furthermore, BDS does not promote justice for anyone because it violates the human rights of both Palestinians and Jews. The reality is that the boycott of Israeli products and the removal of Israeli companies from Palestinian territories cause an increase in Palestinian suffering through the loss of jobs provided by Israeli companies. What BDS supporters will never tell you is that the ones that were hurt the most by the recent pullout of SodaStream are 600 Palestinian Arab workers from Judea and Samaria. They lost jobs that gave them the same salary as Jewish workers and the same benefits, including medical insurance for their whole families. In addition to this obvious harm to Palestinians, BDS violates the human rights of Jews through its stated intent to destroy the state of Israel economically. In that way, it denies Jews the right to national self-determination. The good news is that there's organizations like Proclaiming Justice to the Nations and CAMRA that actively counter the lies and the destructiveness of the BDS movement. The bad news is that there's many who claim to seek justice for all people, who claim to support Israel's right to exist, but do not speak out in opposition to this evil agenda that hurts the very people it claims to be fighting for. At the same time, it's working to destroy the Jewish state. The deafening silence of some in the evangelical community in response to this travesty of justice is also becoming common in the face of another threat to Israel's survival. And that's what I want to focus on, and that's the growing assault on evangelical support of Israel. In some evangelical circles today, it is considered expedient for a variety of reasons to not address the lies and the deception of either movement, both of which share a common goal, the destruction of the state of Israel. Whatever their reasons for doing so, the reality is that Christians who choose a position of silence instead of a stand for justice and truth in response to BDS are complicit in the perpetuation of injustice for all. And evangelicals who remain silent and do not counter a Christian narrative that demonizes and delegitimizes Israel for the purpose of gaining support for the Palestinian cause are complicit in the crusade to turn evangelical support away from the Jewish state. The growing assault on evangelical support of Israel is spearheaded by Palestinian Christian leaders who, just like the promoters of BDS, claim they work for peace and justice. However, in reality, they're promoting a political agenda that's rooted in rewritten history and erroneous theology that does not bring about peace or justice. The Palestinian Christian narrative rewrites history through the outrageous claim that Palestinians, not the Jews, are the indigenous people of the land. This rewritten history forms an essential foundation for a customized version of a 2,000-year-old theology that asserts that Palestinians, not the Jews, are the true people of God. And that's replacement theology that Pastor Cruz has already nicely covered, so I don't need to say any more about that. But one of the logical outcomes of the assertion that Jews are not indigenous to the land is the logical identification of Jesus as a Palestinian. How could Jesus have been Jewish if there were no Jews in the land when he was born there? So this rewritten history, this replacement theology, and the invention of a Palestinian Christian should be very troubling for any Christian who reveres the Bible as an authoritative source of truth and doctrine. Think about the consequences of this. The denial of Jewish history in the land results in the elimination of Christian history as well, because our heritage as Christians begins with the Jews. Likewise, the identification of Jesus as a Palestinian delegitimizes the Christian faith, because our faith is dependent on its Jewish roots. And again, Pastor Cruz has explained that. There's so much in Scripture. So this Palestinian agenda is not only anti-Israel and anti-Jewish, it's ultimately anti-Christian as well. At this point, I want to mention specifically a rapidly growing international movement that could, intentionally or unintentionally, enable the spread of the anti-Israel Palestinian Christian narrative through its emphasis on Christian unity, for the sake of world evangelization. And I want to say there's many wonderful pro-Israel leaders and ministries that are associated with this recent movement. However, there is reason to be concerned about the long-term effects that this organization could have on evangelical support of Israel because of its relationship with Palestinian Christian leaders and its silence in respect to the error and deception that form the foundation of the narrative they promote. The name of this organization is Empowered 21. It is a heavily funded project that intends to, quote, shape the future of the Spirit-empowered movement, end of quote, and evangelize the world by 2033. This sounds like a noteworthy goal. However, the reason for concern over the long-term effects is based on the fact that throughout the E21 conference in Jerusalem this past May, there was a concerted emphasis on the importance of Christian unity for the sake of reaching that goal. Christian unity also sounds like a worthwhile goal. The problem is that in the context of the Jerusalem conference, Empowered 21's call to unity could only be understood as the intent to stand with all Christians no matter what, even those who propagate anti-Jewish theology and anti-Israel propaganda. This unreflective support for Palestinian Christians was demonstrated through the involvement of prominent Palestinian Christian leaders in the conference and the total silence on the part of all the major speakers concerning the error of the agenda to turn evangelical support away from Israel. For example, Jack Serra, he's the president of Bethlehem Bible College. He was one of the invited speakers. Since 2010, Bethlehem Bible College has hosted the biennial Christ at the Checkpoint conferences. Both the Bible College and the conferences it sponsors are influential promoters of anti-Israel propaganda that's rooted in replacement theology and rewritten history. Both institutions identify as evangelical, and they target a Western evangelical audience. It is interesting to note that Palestinian Authority Prime Minister Rami Hamdallah was a featured speaker at the last Christ at the Checkpoint conference. This is significant because in 2001, when he was president of An-Najah University in Nablus, Hamdallah oversaw the commemoration of a recent heroic act of, quote, Palestinian resistance. This heroic act that was being commemorated at this Hamas-sponsored event was what we know of as the suicide bombing of the Sbarro pizzeria in Jerusalem, in which 15 civilians, including 7 children, were killed and another 130 were wounded. Hamdallah's involvement as an invited speaker at Christ at the Checkpoint in 2014 speaks volumes about the true underlying message and purpose of the conference, its leaders, and its sponsoring institution, Bethlehem Bible College. Likewise, the involvement of Jack Serra in Empowered 21, the man at the head of Bethlehem Bible College and Christ at the Checkpoint, speaks volumes about the dangers associated with Empowered 21's ill-founded emphasis on Christian unity at the expense of truth. As a result of its unreflective call for unity, Empowered 21 could well become a vehicle for the international promotion of this Palestinian Christian anti-Israel message. Since this organization claims to represent 640 million evangelical and Pentecostal Christians worldwide, the potential impact of an alliance with those who spread dishonest propaganda against Jews and the Jewish state cannot be overstated. And the danger of Christian silence in the face of any threat to Israel also cannot be overstated, whether that threat comes in the form of BDS or Christian efforts to turn evangelical support away from the Jewish state. It is incumbent on us as Christians, particularly in light of the history that we know so well, to not sign a pact of silence with those who poison the church with lies in relation to Israel. We must do all we can to stand up and speak out and counter lies with the truth. Thank you.
Well, it is my tremendous honor now to introduce you to the chairman of Proclaiming Justice to the Nations, Mr. Stanley G. Tate. He comes to us from Miami, Florida, and I have to tell you that I am honored as the president of this organization to have such a distinguished leader to share the burden of caring, and it is a heavy burden, trust me, but sharing the burden of carrying this organization. We've made tremendous strides over the last 13 years that we've been incorporated as a nonprofit organization producing media. But it's time for PJTN to go to the next level. And in order to go to the next level, we needed a leader like Mr. Stanley Tate. Please welcome Stanley Tate.
Thank you, Laurie, and thank you all for not only coming, but to listening. I come from a different background than most of the speakers here because they have a much greater religious orientation than mine. I'm primarily, as an early profession, a professor at a university, probably one of the largest universities in the United States. Today has 55,000 students. When I went there, believe it or not, they had 2,000 students. 2,000 students, and there were 9 Jews. I was one of the Jews. But we didn't have much anti-Semitism. There weren't enough Jews in Florida in 1944, when I attended the university, to even warrant a movement of anti-Semitism. The purpose of my being here is one of the reasons that I got involved with Laurie, is I have no doubt, after being to Israel over 55 times, you should know the first time I went to Israel was before there was an Israel, when it was a swampland. There isn't anyone who had any brains that would want to have that land for a nation. It was the worst. I've flown over lots of properties. I'm a pilot. And I could tell you, if I had to pick land to form a nation, Israel would have been the last. Israel is only desirable today because of what the Jews created. Those of you who have gone to Israel recently don't see what I saw when it took me maybe 45 minutes in a single-engine, slow-moving plane to fly the length and the breadth of Israel, because there was nothing there. And the truth of the matter is, if you fly the length and the breadth of Israel, you see some of the most beautiful cities in the world, with high-rise office buildings, movie theaters, showrooms, the finest department stores in the world, a huge tourist opportunity for tourism to develop and arrange for a whole new avenue of revenue, farmland, museums, universities. It is a mecca of what a new country would want to have. And for the most part, countries have tried to achieve what Israel achieved in 60 years. They haven't achieved it in 260 years. Even America, which has achieved a lot. And I'm an American. I was born in this country. I've lived in Miami the better part of my life, 86 years. And Miami is now a big city. You know why it became a big city? Because originally it started to be a big city because it was warm weather and we were in the war, the Second World War. Miami had over 400,000 servicemen who attended a navigation school and an Air Force academy in a small town north of Miami, and all those soldiers who came couldn't believe that in the middle of the winter, it was 75 degrees. And most of them came from New Jersey, New York, Detroit, Chicago. And when they called their wives or their mothers and said, "You won't believe how warm it is here," and they said, "Enjoy it. It's 2 degrees here. We have the heat on." And many of them decided that was where they wanted to live. And that was the impetus, truly, that made Miami a great city. So I've lived all my life there. When I graduated from college, I went ahead and got a bachelor's degree initially, and then a master's degree, and then a doctorate degree, and I became a professor on the faculty of the University of Florida. University of Florida, I didn't say when it started when I was there, was an all-boys school. It wasn't co-ed. The co-ed school in Florida was Florida State College for Women, which was located in Tallahassee. It's today Florida State University, which is co-ed. And the University of Florida, where I taught today, is co-ed. And from 2000, as I mentioned before, 54,000 today. And instead of having 9 Jewish students, University of Florida today is the second largest Jewish population of a university or college in the world. We have 9,500 admitted Jews. Am I right, Rabbi? Is that the right word? Admitted Jews?
Okay.
Okay. Because what I have found out in that atmosphere, that there are a lot of Jews today that don't even want to be admitted as being Jews and don't want to admit it to their friends. Wow. And they join different fraternities that are non-Jewish, and they want to disassimilate themselves from Judaism. That's unfortunate for them. When the BDS movement got started, I got involved not because I was a good Jew. I couldn't understand it. I really couldn't understand it. So I took the time to study it. And I'll give you the conclusions. They're very simple. The conclusions were, for 2,800 years, the Jews have been fighting the war of trying to rid the world of Judaism. Their opponents, in every single case, never won.
That's right.
It's the truth. Many Jews died, many Jews, but their opponents lost more. And this went on and on and on. The anti-Semites of the world, who hates the Jews, they don't even know why they hate the Jews. They really don't. They can make up a lot of reasons, but I don't really believe they know what they're talking about. It's become a theme of livelihood. You grow up hating a Jew. My father hated a Jew. My mother hated a Jew. My grandmother hated a Jew. And it's been handed down, as the rabbi said, I think 2,800 years?
2,300.
Okay. I've always used the 3,000-year mark. And I could tell you that that bothered me, because when people hate people for no reason, except it was a handout, there's something wrong with the reality of the world. So I became a fighter against anti-Semitism, because it made no sense. And because I was a victim, because I was a Jew. Never really understood much about anti-Semitism, and I didn't run into it until I became older. I ran into it much older because I became successful. When I quit school, and that's another story, but I won't go into it. When I quit school to make a living instead of teaching, I made a fairly successful arrangement, and as a wealthy Jew, all of a sudden I ran into anti-Semitism all over the place because I gave money to a temple. And I was also very involved in Israel because I admired what they were doing there. When I say they, it was the Jews. Trust me when I tell you, in 1942, I think was the first year I went, there was no such thing as a Palestinian in Israel. I don't care what they say, it was their land. They don't know what they're talking about. I was there. It was no one's land. The Palestinians were a bunch of tribes. They came wherever there was water and a place to park their camels, like the Jews were. They were a bunch of tribes. The difference was the Jews knew that Palestine and Israel were going to be their homeland because it was written in every logical and truthful book that you can rely on. And in my estimation, as a professor and someone who has learned about religion, there's only two such books. It's the Old Testament and the New Testament. There's no other book that's ever been produced that hasn't got a single lie in it. It's all factual. When the anti-Semites make up stories about Israel, and you go to the Torah, or even the New Testament, which is now 2,000 years old, historically, these stories that they're making up are just what I just said. They're made up. They have no basis in reality. So anti-Semitism has no basis in reality. Because it has nothing to do with the individual Jew. It has to do with Judaism. So I then try to analyze why was BDS an arrangement to get rid of the Jews? And it was simple. The anti-Semites had lost every fight they've ever had to get rid of the Jews. How can they get rid of the Jews now in a progressive world where the things that were produced are meaningful, where we have jet planes, we have automobiles, we have all the things that we all enjoy? How do you do it? Simple. Economically. That's what BDS is all about. It's the economics of ruining a country. Now, how do you do that? Simple. You get those people who don't believe in the rights of Judaism or the rights of Israel as a Jewish nation, even though the rest of the world only less than 300 years ago agreed that the Jews had a right. Even the English, the Balfour Declaration, I can go over all of the historical factors, but you all know that. So they then said, how do we do it? How do we prevent Israel from maintaining their existence on an economic basis? What they did was they went around to see what group of people in large numbers that were not Jewish and didn't like the Jews, if there's such a group existed, who would join them. And I can tell you they found that group. And I can give you the names of the people because I've investigated it over 4 years. And the people they found were the Palestinians. And all of a sudden, there was an amalgamation of two groups of people, anti-Semites and Palestinians, who wanted the same end result. The Palestinians wanted Israel because they wanted the land that now became the most valuable land in the world, with big cities, big factories, and all the other things. What the Palestinians don't realize, every time the Jews removed them from places they had settled, they lived better in places where the Jews were than they ever lived in their own settlements. And if you go to Israel today, there's probably 700,000 Palestinians that are Israel's citizens. There's 16 members of the Knesset that are Palestinians. Only a country like Israel would want people who didn't believe in Israel, including the members of the Knesset that are Palestinians, to be members of the governing body of their country. I addressed the Knesset for the President of the United States. I flew there on Air Force One. One of the things I didn't mention, when I left college and went into business, and after a while, I got involved in politics. One of the things I formed 68 years ago was the Republican Party in the United States. I was the chairman of the Republican Party of the United States. I'm truly an American in every sense of the word. I also went to law school, and I understand the Constitution and the Bill of Rights much better than the average person. And I understand, with all of the benefits, why America became such an outstanding nation. What's happening now, though, America, because of the lack of protecting what we have, is deteriorating. And it's deteriorating because there are forces that want to bring America down, including the current presidential administration. In that way, what happens? America becomes vulnerable. Forget Judaism for a minute. America, vulnerable. What was the best source of this new group affiliate to bring people back into their fold? Who are the most eligible, intelligent people? College students. College students. So where is the greatest anti-Semitism today in the United States? On every major university and college in the country. I'm a member of the trustees of the University of the state of Florida. Florida has more universities and colleges than any state in the Union. We have 34 colleges and 12 universities, all up through and including a doctorate degree. We have over 900,000 students attending those colleges and universities. That's what made Florida great. It had an educated population. The BDS movement was very cleverly drafted by those people who wanted to destroy the Jews. And if they took the free world with them, that was okay too. Because to a great extent, they were led by another tribe of people who didn't believe in the right of religion, because they really believed their religion, if you want to call it that, was the only religion available for anyone to have. And that included Christianity, Judaism, Hinduism, and any other religion you want, except the one that they developed. And that's why the ISIS movement is so important to be defeated by the free world. And I can give you a lot more statistics about what I have found out because I've really studied it. So to prevent the BDS movement from being successful, and because of Laurie's organization recognizing that it was successful only as it related to Israel, I realized if they were successful with Israel, the next country that would fail would be the United States. As much as Americans don't believe that can happen, they don't believe it because of pure stupidity. You know, being a professor who studied a long time, you learn a lot of things, and you learn a lot of things by learning history. So that's why the BDS movement is so important, to prevent it from being an effective source of ending Israel and eventually ending the free world. And that's why I decided to do what I could to help their movement, to end the BDS movement, because I've been involved in the political world in this state, in this country, all my life. I gave a dinner in Washington. I had 57 United States senators there and 130 members of the House, all on a first-name basis. They were all friends of mine. So we decided the best way to end the BDS movement was through legislation. And we felt that time was a big consideration, so we used the routine of resolutions. There isn't any organization that understands the political way to rid or get anything politically any better than me. I've been involved in politics all my life. To do it through the method of ordinances is a long process because of the democratic principles. It's got to go through committees, it's got to go back, and all, that's not a criticism, it's a good system. It wouldn't work for this. BDS doesn't have the need for a lot of time to be successful. They could cause Israel to be bankrupt within maybe 2 years. I don't even think it's that long. 2 years from the time it became effective in this country. Because the concept was to prevent any products that were made or came from Israel to be sold anywhere in the world. Initially, it was going to be in Europe and then the United States. They had no difficulty in getting in Europe because our esteemed president endorsed it. He thought that the BDS movement was something that the Europeans should consider taking on, and they did. And it was written up, it's no secret. But we had a large number of people who really recognized that that was a destructive movement for this country. It had less to do with Israel than it had to do with the survival of the free world. And it's an interesting thing, but Americans will protect America first, no matter if they're Jewish, Gentile, or anything else. And that's the embodiment of our strength in being able to get these resolutions passed. Because as they've passed, we've already got, I think, 6 or 7 states, New York, Tennessee, Florida, we did it both ways, ordinance and resolution. I got the resolution passed over a week ago. The ordinance was passed this week. But that means that the ordinance isn't enough, because the ordinance was only passed in Florida by the Senate. I tried to find out if the House passed it. I got enough votes in the House to make sure it will pass. And if we can get it done through ordinances, so much the better. But we don't have the time to do it in 50 states through ordinances. So the concept was we're going to move forward with resolutions, support the ordinances, and do what we can to make sure that the movement fails. And that's what we believe we've been able to accomplish. I was in Michigan a week ago, and Michigan has already passed it. Illinois has already passed it. Resolution. In Illinois, they told me it would take them 4 years to get an ordinance passed. I said, let's publicize the resolution. And all of a sudden, a large number of businesses said they don't want to do business with people who won't allow Israel products to be sold there. So it defeated the effort of the BDS movement in the state of Illinois. And that's the whole purpose of resolutions. It's a quick way to get it done. So our effort, for the time being, to some extent, not total, on our organization will be to prevent the BDS from being an effective way to bring the downfall of Israel and potentially the downfall of the free world. And that's why the problem of stopping BDS is a lot more significant than being it characterized as Israel. It's much more than Israel. It's much more. And this empowerment that's trying to destroy the free world is the same group that's trying to destroy Israel. And that's where it started, because they hated the Jews and still do. Even though there isn't a single one of them that can give you a truthful reason why a man or a woman can hate the Jew. They don't know a reason. They've made up reasons. I can refute every reason I've ever heard from anyone who's ever said to me, I dislike Jews. You may dislike a Jew, that's okay. You dislike the person. But don't tell me you dislike Jews or Catholics or Protestants or anything else. Not a group. You can't dislike them. It doesn't work. It's lies. So that's why the BDS movement is so important to be removed from the agenda. If Israel is the beneficiary of that, so be it. But I could tell you, my initial thrust in this whole involvement was for the free world. Because I believe if the free world doesn't prevent this from happening, not only is Israel endangered, but every one of you sitting there are endangered, and if it's not you, it's going to be your grandchildren. Because what's happening in this country today, let me give you some statistics and I'll sit down. There are over 3,000 mosques in the United States with an average of 12 to 1,500 members. 55% of them preach weekly the downfall of the United States as a free economic society. How many of you have ever been to a mosque? Not many. They don't want you there, you know that. I got in because someone brought me in. What I heard there scared me. What the leader of the mosque said about what his members should do to eliminate this country, including Jews and everyone else who is not part of their movement. So this is a bigger war than simply a war against Christianity and Judaism and all the other religions, because the ISIS movement wants their own religion and they will not tolerate any other. If you read the Quran, and I've read it, and I think the rabbi mentioned to me he had read it too, you will see it said over and over again. And one of the 4 ways to do this, and the last one was, if they don't want to do it as you want, is to kill them. That's the ISIS movement. And it's America that has to recognize that as a common enemy and the rest of the free world and defeat it forever. So that's why this is such an important thing. And I thank you for the permission, and I know I spoke longer than I should have, but thank you very much.
Our next guest is none other than Brad Stein. Many of you know him as a political comedian. I was able to get to know Brad very well this past year while we traveled in Israel filming our next documentary, Hating Israel in Search of the Truth Behind BDS. So I have to tell you, I admire this guy because he's not all just laughs. Brad was willing, during the time that we were in Israel, there were portions of the trip that I could not go with the film crew, into the West Bank areas, places that would not be safe for me. But rather than back down, Brad was willing to go into those areas to bring a message of truth to the world. And so not only did he make me laugh a lot with some of his humor, and it was very difficult sitting on the same set with him, watching him interview some of our guests that we filmed the interviews with, because of his humor. I admire him, I appreciate him, and I hope you will appreciate him even more once you hear his heart about Israel as he went in search of BDS. Brad Stein.
Thank you, thank you. I appreciate you guys coming out. I had a few things I did want to mention about why I got involved with this project, but after hearing the eloquence of Dr. Cruz, I realized no matter what I say, it's going to sound stupid, because he obviously is very well researched and very well understands the problem that's being faced not only in Israel, but about the United States and what used to be our absolute commitment to defending Israel. And growing up as an evangelical Christian, there was never any doubt that you had to support Israel. Number one, they're your elder brother, so to speak. I mean, we're talking about our faith system. That's this entire building, for NRB, for the Christian community, exists because of Jews. They were there first. Amen. God gave them his message for how humanity was going to work and how things were going to happen. And of course, we came from that lineage as Christians. So when they told me, that they were going to do this, I had worked with Stan, Laura's husband, on a comedy project a few years back, and so I knew Stan. And he's told me about this project that they were doing. And I said, yeah, it sounds great. I love talking about things that matter to me. And as a comedian, I realized really what God had gifted me with, and I'm a communicator. I'm just good at communicating ideas that might be normally considered dry or political or boring, and finding a way to laymanize them and make the average person who not only maybe doesn't understand these issues, but doesn't even think they're important, want to care about this and want to participate in defending Israel, not only as our really only ally in the Middle East. I suppose the other ones can try to fake it, but that's truly who we need to support and need their support, I might add. I got to visit numerous businesses. I think it's the number one in the entire world. I think they have more startups in Israel than any other place in the world. Mm-hmm. This is one of the smallest nations, surrounded by enemies, and the products and the technology that is coming out of this, almost as though they are blessed by God or something. Almost as though no matter how badly people want to wipe these poor people out who, maybe the rabbi can inform me, whatever these Jewish people did that made everybody so angry for so long, I don't have the slightest idea. All I know is they've been wandering around desert trying to find themselves a place to stay in peace, just like any other human being would want. But I guess they had the double-edged sword of having the God of the universe choose them to represent his story to the world until he comes to end this world as we know it and redeem it and bring back Eden, where we can all finally live in peace and harmony as it should be. So to be able to go there as a comic, I wanted to bring some levity to a very, very important subject. It's not funny what's happening in Israel. As we were there, I know there was 2 terrorist attacks. This is a way of life for them. the two of the bodyguards that we had told me, you know, as they got news from, I think the San Bernardino shooting took place while we were over there, if I'm not mistaken, which was Muslim terrorism in America. And our bodyguards kind of sat there and said, yeah, well, that's new for you. We've been dealing with this for 60 years. This is how we have lived our entire existence. Hated simply because of who we are. And so that was a sobering thought. And what was so amazing to me is we would come driving back, and of course we're in this Rolls-Royce bus, probably had James Bond equipment connected to it and lasers, and we had guys, you know, these are Israeli Special Forces guys that have guns everywhere and can kill you like with a peach. That's how amazing they are. There's anything gets in their way, they can crush. And I felt, well, at least I'm kind of protected because I'm an American. I'm not used to walking down the street wondering if this is the day somebody's going to stab me because I happen to have curls or a yarmulke. This is starting now. This is becoming and is going to be our reality. Certainly if we don't get a new president who's ready to defend this nation from terrorism. But these terrorist attacks would take place. They would go arbitrarily stab people. And we would come in the evening, coming back into town, and I would see people walking the streets, maybe some dark areas, walking. They're not being intimidated. They're not good. I mean, they know this might be the last day I'm on earth, but no one will drive me and my liberty out of my country. We will show them nothing for crying. If any group of people have a legacy of being the most documented oppressed people in the history of the world, it's Jews. And to see the noble dignity of these people who deal with these things and continue to live their lives and refuse to be intimidated or to be imprisoned in their own community gave me the remembrance of what happened in this nation a couple hundred years ago when regular people just like you and me said, are you willing to risk your life, your liberty, and your fortune to have freedom? And a pastor would say a sermon, close his Bible, take off his robe, grab his musket and his congregants, and go to war. That's why we have the freedom to sit here right now without a gun to our head telling us how we're allowed to think. And as Pastor Cruz so eloquently said, the founding fathers made it very clear that our rights in America come from God, not from the Constitution. Oh, we'll write down those ideas so you know what's protected. But they come from God, which means they cannot be changed. They are immutable. You don't get to change just because the culture decides that whatever they desire is their right. That lack of discipline and that lack of commitment to what true freedom really takes is why America is slowly dying. And so I hope that you, as press people, will help get the word out about this documentary that exposes the anti-Semitism, by the way, that is rebuilding in Europe unbelievably. Yes, it is. How is that possible? How many movies about Nazism do we need to see to figure this shouldn't happen again? Yeah. Well, it is. So I hope that you will tell people about this, help get the word out, that this will help educate people about what the BDS movement is, about its anti-Semitic roots, about what it would cost the world to lose investment in technology and resources that Israel gives to us, and that it will reunite the younger evangelicals who are falling into this lie that Israel is an apartheid state and Palestinians are occupied. When I was the age of these kids, I was taught we defend Israel at the peril of what will happen if we turn on them. And now our younger kids are being taught the opposite. This is the most crucial season in America by far on who we need as a new administration and how we need to see and defend Israel so God can allow us to continue as the greatest nation the world had ever known. Thanks.
So now we're going to turn it over. We're going to change a little bit, and we're going to hear from one of my favorite rabbis, Rabbi Jonathan Hausman. If any of you have been here before to our press briefings or attended our events here at the NRB, Rabbi Hausman has become a staple. And if you've heard him speak, you're going to know why. Because he's not going to, there's no humor, although he may try some.
That's not true.
No, okay, I'll give you a little credit. He has a serious message. And yeah, okay, he delivers it with a little bit of spice. But it's important to hear his message. And Rabbi Hausman, you know, he's unique because he has a synagogue where he hosts a Christian evangelical church service on Sunday mornings. And he's going to probably tell you about that. But he sees and he understands how critically important it is that Christians and Jews come together in this hour. Our Jewish brethren are our older brother in the faith. And I have to tell you, Rabbi Hausman teaches me so much every time I hear him. So I hope you will join me in giving Rabbi Jonathan Hausman a warm welcome.
Lori, thank you. Unfortunately, I have to go home, and my daughter will tell me that I'm not as great as you think I am. So, I'll be honest with you. What Lori said is true. We do house in my synagogue an evangelical church, an affiliate of Word of Faith International Christian Centers, based in Southfield, Michigan. And I wasn't going to talk about it today. We'll just see how my comments go, and if you're interested, just ask me during Q&A, and I'll tell you what ended up happening. Brad had mentioned, I'm paraphrasing, okay? So I don't want to be the butt of anything here, all right? All right, good. You know, we Jews are the chosen people. Chosen for what? Chosen for what? And what's the reason for it? I think it's because we allow our mothers to torture us mercilessly, as my mother did to me and my 3 younger brothers. There's only one person here who knew my mother. No comments, please. In 2008, my mother, it was post-election, and I called her, as I always did, because like a good Jewish son who couldn't get along with his life, I used to speak with her every day anyway. And I said, so what do you think in the aftermath of the election? And she said, you know, and really this was a moment of crystal thought, lucidity beyond belief, prescience beyond belief, perspicacity beyond belief. And yes, I do want you to run to your dictionaries. She said the following. She said, you know, mind you, Obama had just been elected. She said the following. She said, you know, she said, John, Jewish history runs in 70-year cycles. And those of you who are suffused with Jewish life, the few of you here who have the honor of being Jewish, you know, 7 is a mystical, magical number for us, and any multiple thereof. So here's 70. And 70 resonates in a number of other ways as well. So I said, okay, Ma, why do you say that? She said, you know, I came of age in the Depression. I lived through the era of appeasement. I was an adult during World War II. I never thought I lived through this again. Ever. She said, you know, in the medieval period, we were hated for our faith. You get to the 19th century, she said, whether you're talking about a number of the French philosophers during and post the French Revolution, whether you want to talk about Karl Marx and Engels, whether you want to talk about Nazism, she said, late 18th, 19th, and 20th century, we were hated because of our race. She said that's what they were focused on. We were hated for our race. She said, and I want to tell you, she said, and I want to make sure that my granddaughter, your daughter, knows this. She said, since 1948, it's all changed. She said, I just realized it's all changed. She said, now we're not hated for our religion. Now we're not hated for our faith. We're hated now because we have a state. She said, but I want you to understand something. With the creation of Israel in 1948, we have taken our collective destiny back in our own hands. We are actors in our history now. Nobody can act upon us. And my Uncle Ziggy, very close family friend, who he and his wife were like an aunt and uncle to me. I remember my Uncle Ziggy taking us aside, my brothers as well. And he said, I want you to understand something. This was right before my youngest brother got married. He said, I want you to understand something. The world hates strong Jews. Right. This is a practicing Roman Catholic who said this. The world hates strong Jews. Treasure spoke about what's happening on the college campuses. I got to be honest with you. It's not just evangelical Christian. It's not just Christian professors. There are Jewish professors involved in this poison. Yes. And if you've been following the news, there's BDS resolution that was filed in the Rhode Island State House, and you knew who came out to protest against that resolution that would protect Jews and the state of Israel? Jewish students from Brown University came out to protest this. BDS. You know, we Jews are great with acronyms. BDS, you probably think it stands for boycott, divest, and sanction. How about buy, develop, and support? Yeah. How about baseless, despicable stupidity? It was just announced, I think it was yesterday, maybe today, Israel, the land of miracles, from the Jewish people, the people of miracles, another discovery, a cure for prostate cancer in 20 minutes. Yeah. Listen, I don't know the science behind it. I'm a rabbi, I'm an attorney, I'm a political scientist, I'm a linguist, okay? I'm even a rabbi part-time. I don't understand. My youngest brother could tell me the medicine behind this. All I know is it's something injectable, okay, and the tumor becomes necrotic within 20 minutes. 20 minutes. Wow. 1 in 6. Okay, I'll take. Can I get an amen? There we go. Okay. All right. 20 minutes. A 20-minute cure for prostate cancer. A 20-minute cure. Okay, 20-minute cure. Statistically, 1 in 6 American men will develop prostate cancer. Okay? The only other cancer in this country that is more prevalent is skin cancer. Prostate cancer cured in 20 minutes. So, these two Israeli scientists that have done what they've done through the Weizmann Institute, okay, I can't even remember their names. All I need to know is there were a couple of Jews. They live in Israel. I don't need to know anything else. It's very simple. It's very simple. You want to support BDS? Please go off in a cave and die.
That's right.
Okay? Please.
Amen.
Don't bother me with your nonsense. If you believe in BDS, don't use these. Okay? If you believe in BDS, please, gastrointestinal cancer. You can die from that too. Because why should you swallow that small little pill? With the cameras, that has been part of medicine for, I don't know, how many, a dozen years now? Why do it? Why do it? BDS, it's unbelievable. You know what the aim of boycott, the BDS movement is? Anybody know what the aim is? Oh yeah, you do. All right, so I'll tell you anyway, okay? I'll tell you anyway. The aim is to completely eradicate Israel. That's the aim. That's the stated aim by no less than its founder, Amar Baruti, okay, who, by the way, got his degree from Tel Aviv University. Avi, correct? Boycotters target the Jewish state and the Jewish state alone. Nothing else. They don't go after any other liberal democracy. They don't go after any other dictatorship. They only go after Jews. Period. And wherever it surfaces, it's accompanied by the harassment of Jews. It can be Jewish students on campus. How does it make a dad, a father of a college junior feel? Because that's my situation now. How many Jewish students have to retreat from the campus for fear of intimidation? Or kosher food being forcibly removed from a college cafeteria, let alone supermarket shelves? Or Ahava products, by the way, you can find it downstairs in the what's the shops. Yeah, the shop downstairs. Don't buy it if you believe in BDS. Let your skin wrinkle, please do. Let it do it. Okay, okay. Or idiots. I can use idiots here, right? Yeah. Okay. Idiots like Roger Waters, who created some unbelievable music. But why should you go to a Pink Floyd concert? If you are remotely sensitive to Jewish history, and I know Brad is, I know Pastor Cruz is, I know Lori is, I know Trish is, Stan has to be. This Stan. That Stan too. If you are even remotely sensitive to Jewish history, you know that boycotts have been the instruments of Jewish persecution for millennia. We Jews have been putting up with this nonsense for 2,300 years. So when my synagogue rents space to an evangelical congregation, a church, a primarily African American church, a primarily black American church, and they talk about oppression, I tell them, you think you guys invented it? We've been living it for 2,300 years. And I don't know how much time I've taken. I'm going to wrap up with this. I mean, I could go on for, well, I'm a rabbi and attorney. It takes me an hour to order from a menu. So what? I just, the hypocrisy behind this is just absolutely unbelievable. From an administration that claims, and I'll put my prejudices out there, I didn't vote for this administration in 2008, and I did in 2012. Any guy who can sit in a church like that for 21 years doesn't deserve to be a president, doesn't deserve to be a senator, doesn't deserve to be a representative. Nothing. Okay? Nothing. Which is why I didn't need to know anything else. You sit in a church like that, okay? The hypocrisy behind this is just absolutely unbelievable. From the use of the medical discoveries to the technologies, okay, to where a lot of these people have gotten their educations, okay, an administration that claims to be the most pro-Israel administration ever, which is not true, but that's another lecture, okay, all right, that says that welcoming to free trade, but in the next instance orders the Customs Department to label products coming from the West Bank as products from the West Bank. Okay? And that's what this administration has ordered the customs agency to do. Forget the Oslo Accords. Okay, forget what areas are under exclusive Israeli control. Anybody can speak words, but actions, you must look at the actions. BDS is nothing more than anti-Semitism. They come for Jews first, and then they come for you second.
That's right.
And that's what this is about. Nothing more. I thank you for your time.